I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. For all who care to join me, let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. And we are missing Commissioner Hawk. Okay. I'd like to read the board norms. Debate, commentary, and discussion are healthy and open. Listening and speaking are equally important, and both should be done with respect and consideration. Focus is on students and our schools, not politics. Assume best intentions in all discussions. We have a couple of items that we need to add to the agenda. Is that how we do it first?
Oh, I think we need to add the committee reports first because it's the whole agenda.
And then add these to the consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So under committee reports, we are missing building and finance. So if I could have a motion to add both of those to the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And then I have 3 items to add to the consent agenda. The first is minutes from last night's meeting, executive session. The minutes from the Finance and Planning Committee on December 3rd, and a personnel memorandum. If I could have a motion to add those to the consent agenda.
Motion to add to the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Do we have anyone here from the community for public input? Nope. We didn't have anyone sign up. Nope. Okay. So we do have Chris Van Syver.
Okay, great, thanks. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you, everybody, for allowing me the time to speak to you today. If I may, I'd like to put these to you and ask if you could take 1 or 2 and pass them around, please. I have a board members. So my name is Chris Van Syver. I'm the ELA teacher at the middle school and the organizer for our community resource fair and coffee house, which is coming up on January 15th at the middle school from 5 to 7:30 p.m. And I wanted to come and personally invite you all to come join us. The community resource fair and coffee house is a night where we join together the multitude of resources that we have in our community to meet with our families. This is everything from having our own food pantry and clothing closet, but also having community members and resources that are here that can help our families with heating assistance, with mental or physical health concerns, with financial assistance, looking for jobs, looking for support. Thanks so much, appreciate that. There's a wide variety. Last year we had 36 partners come in and visit us. We're actually anticipating a few more this year as well. While adults are having conversations with our community partners, sometimes sensitive conversations, we also have a coffee house going on in the library where students and some faculty and some other community adults are performing to entertain the guests who are there. We serve food, we serve a dinner as well as some refreshments, and there may even be some other arts and entertainment things going on as well. This year we're holding it in the Keith Gym, so it's a little bit, there's a little larger space and it's more accessible for anybody with disabilities. And a lot of our, this is signage that now we are also going to have printed in Arabic, French, Spanish, and Swahili for some of our new community members as well.
That's great.
So I wanted to invite you all, and I hope to see you all there. Please feel free to display these anywhere you want. I have extra copies if you like. If anybody has any questions or any comments about the event, I'm happy to field those before I say thank you and depart.
I actually have a couple more.
Yes, please.
You want? Sure. Yeah, pass one of those.
Can you tell them about the
No,
religious,
more.
reaching out to the religious organization? Yes, you did. Okay. And I went to this event last year, and it was absolutely amazing. The families, the resource partners. It just, I spent a couple of hours. Like, it was really a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Absolutely, no, it's a great event, and it's nice. We try to make sure that it's mutually beneficial. Not only do our families get to know a lot of the resources that are out there, some of the resources that are out there also connect with families who are willing to volunteer or donate or support or connect with somebody else who might not be at the event. So it's a great event. Love to get as much word out, pre-K through 12 and around the community to as many people as we can.
And will the dinner begin at 5?
The dinner will be available at 5. It's not a sit-down dinner. It's if you'd like to go meet with partners first and then eat something, great. If you want to eat and then meet, that's fine as well. There's a lot of wandering, which is nice. And again, we try to have it was wonderful. We had a lot of high school volunteers, middle school volunteers helping to direct traffic so that we can sort of direct the kids to the art room for an art project and to the library or the coffee house. So yeah, it's free-flowing in that respect.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Okay, moving to our student rep reports.
There is no shortage of things to recognize this month at RIS. Our community has been very gracious in helping to ensure our students will have an enjoyable holiday season. In the spirit of giving, our students are also organizing ways to show support to those in need within our community. The following students were selected as winners in the 2025 Barbara Howe Fire.
I'm sorry, could you just speak a little louder?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Maggie McCoy, January Humphreys, June, and Grace Doan as first runner-up for September. The students in the RIS art teacher visited the Vermont State House on Friday, December 6th to attend a ceremony in their honor. RIS new robotics club B-Bots has their first qualifier on Sunday, December 15th, starting at noon at RHS. This Thursday, December 12th, RIS is hosting grades 5 and 6 band, choral, and orchestra concert beginning at 7. November at Northeast was filled with opportunities to connect with our students, families, and members of the greater community. From STEAM Day to Grocery Bingo, our annual community luncheon, family engagement projects, and our second grade concert, we loved how connected we were past month. December's Pause character trait is all about being creative, and we hope families will join us again on December 17th to take part in some creative crafts for our PTC Make It Take It night. We recognize that the holiday season can be challenging for families. If you need support, please don't hesitate to reach out to our school counselors. We're here to help connect families with the resources they may need during this time of year. Happy holidays to all. Each month at Northwest School, we highlight a teacher in our newsletter. This highlight provides insights to the staff we have in our district. I would encourage the community to check out our monthly highlights in our newsletter that is placed on the Northwest website each month. Our second grade students provide an amazing concert to our community. Ms. Cole works with students to be prepared to display an array of musical skills. We appreciate her commitment to the program and are impressed with the musical knowledge of our students acquired. Please check out the most recent segment of the RCPS Learning Lounge on PEG TV. We highlighted a few of the amazing after-school opportunities for our students. We echo the same sentiments as Northeast with supporting our families. If you need support, please reach out to the school. We have several connections in the community that can offer assistance.
Stafford is wrapping up their sophomore recruiting season after hosting all area sophomores for showcase visits. We will hold our annual career night on Thursday, December 12th from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m., where prospective students and their families will have the opportunity to visit programs of interest. In addition to meeting the program instructor, families will be able to chat with current students and some alumni and business partners. A dinner will be available from 6 to 6:30 p.m., and we welcome anyone that would like to learn more about Stafford. RMS is gearing up for our lifelong sports program, which will run from January 9th to February 13th. Students will spend several hours a week for 6 weeks participating in an array of sports from karate, ice skating, rock climbing, cross country, and downhill skiing and bowling. We are excited to see our FastBridge scores improve throughout the year in both math and ELA. FastBridge is benchmark assessment we use to identify students needing more support and areas of improvement for our school. 6 RMS students will be participating in the Unified Bowling Tournament tomorrow. Wish them luck. Rutland High School had a great speech tournament at MSJ. There were 4 ninth graders participating for the first time. One of them, Carmen McCurrier, got 2nd place in poetry, and Will Lasky got 3rd in extemp, which was great. Congratulations to all those who participated. We are in peak performing arts season. Encore Theater staged their performance of Step on a Crack, and the chorus concert was held last week. Both performances were outstanding. Next, Orchestra will host their concert tomorrow night at 7 p.m. at RIS, and the band concert will be held on Monday evening.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have the UVM Outstanding Teacher of the Year recognition.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to allow me to speak. I'm Jess Henderson, the Coordinator of Support Services at PPLC, and I would like to present Krista Desiree to you this evening, who has had the honor of receiving the UVM Outstanding Teacher Award. And I'm going to share a few words about Krista. Krista's in her 5th year working at Pure Point Personalized Learning Center. She spent her 1st year as our multi-age general ed classroom teacher and 3 years as a dedicated school counselor. She embodies the essence of what it means to be an outstanding educator. She possesses the unparalleled ability to connect with our youngest and most challenging students, understanding their unique challenges and needs. She creates social and emotional lessons connected to our portrait of graduate traits, keeping wellness goals in mind. Students are learning to take risks and do hard things in a safe and healthy environment. Krista is a leader who goes above and beyond for our program, not only for students, but for staff as well. She's also a bridge for parents. She communicates with almost all of our parents on an almost daily basis. She can handle challenging situations with grace and sensitivity, always prioritizing the well-being of students. Her ability to maintain a positive outlook and offer encouragement, even in difficult circumstances, makes her an excellent choice for this honor. I couldn't be more proud to see Krista be recognized as the UVM Outstanding Educator.
Congratulations. Well deserved.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm here with Cindy Trevino, who is incredibly uncomfortable right now. So I will be a little more brief. That's my gift to you. Cindy started her career at high school as a special educator, and particularly around the time of COVID, when we saw a great need for alternative education. Cindy moved into an alternative education role. As the lead teacher in our in-house alternative program, Cindy is tirelessly devoted to her students. She arrives early, she stays late to assist her students in every way that she can. She gives them whatever it is that they need in order to stay engaged in school, and that might be a warm coat, it might be a nudge in the right direction, a kind word, a meal, but more than anything else, Cindy gives of herself every single day. So Cindy is truly deserving of this honor, and it is my honor to present to you the UVM Rutland High School Teacher of the Year, Cindy Trevino.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
That's very impressive. Two teachers.
Okay, I see Ted back there behind the. Hi, you're up.
And the superintendent's report.
Oh, we're not.
Right there.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yep, I
you're
skipped.
okay.
Sorry.
I was gonna go.
You got promoted.
Somebody else is getting promoted. I'm going to be brief. I'd like to give Karen my ETA, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, there
I
you go.
appreciate that, as we all do.
Yeah, that's right. I wanted to let the board know, so we've been having discussions around, well, it's really around the state and around the counties in particular I'm talking about how we make sure that we're looking for efficiencies, in this case I'm talking about between districts, in promoting learning opportunities. So we're looking for efficiencies in promoting learning opportunities. And that's a challenge given the declining population that the state's facing and an aging population. So the demographics are against us in a certain way. And so I'm sure you've heard about the discussion, how do we combat that statewide and how do we combat that locally? So we superintendents in this area have been talking about this. We've been talking about it with the AOE and with legislators, and our concept is there might be governance structure changes that could promote efficiencies. There might be school structural changes that could promote more learning opportunities. And that's kind of where how do we do this and how do we go forward? To go forward, I'm sure that the population or the citizenship will have to have the same discussion. The parent community has to consider these things. The business community would have to consider it, because we're partnering with all these groups to serve the community, and we want to make sure that our kids are well served with learning opportunities and that we have efficiencies that help make sure it's affordable. So we've been talking about that for the last bunch of months, but really just a lot recently, and I want to make you aware of it. And I would encourage the board to start having that same conversation. There might be efficiencies across districts that boards could consider to make education more affordable. There might be learning opportunities across districts that could help give more opportunities to kids. So I'm just trying to plant the seed. I'm sure this is going to be a discussion that's going to be more and more frequent as we go forward, especially this year. And I know we talked with the AOE this week about it, and we'll be talking about the same topic again in a month to see what else we could do to make something really constructive happen. So that's all I really have for tonight.
Okay, thank you. Melissa.
So last month we had presented to you our budget and information about our purpose and community exploratory. So we're back tonight to see if you have any questions, and then we presented in the board packet 5 motions that we need to move forward through the process. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have.
Okay. Shall we start with motions, or does anyone have
I just
any?
had a question.
Sure.
The first motion, the closure of the video communications program, is that because there's no interest, or?
So it's been a program that has been in our program review process. It was put in there by the Regional Advisory Board last year, and the board also approved that. At the end of the school year, we had 3 students interested in it for this year, and our instructor had resigned.
Right.
So we paused it for this year. Preliminary signs showed that, again, there was low interest, and so as part of the budgetary considerations that we had to make this year in order to meet the guidelines of where we needed to be to fit into what our RAB charged us with, we had it in the program, and so that was a program that was, and parts of it can be absorbed into our digital arts program.
Okay, because I was going to say, we had just redone that whole area, correct? So will that stay the way it is in case the program comes back, or?
It was really structural things that any program could move into that
Okay.
space, and the RAB has been talking about potential new programs down the road, and so some of those would fit nicely in that space.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to start
Yeah.
with the motions and then?
Yeah, sure. Want me to
Okay.
make a motion?
Yeah, please.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the permanent closure of the video communications program effective the 2025-2026 school year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to approve the scope and sequence for the full-day pre-tech exploratory program as outlined for implementation in the 2025-26 school year with the following credit recommendation: 1 English, 1 math, 1 science, 1 social studies, 1 half art, 1 half health, 1 half personal finance, and 2 electives.
I just have a question on that. Could you just explain more about what that means?
Absolutely. So this is a program we've been talking about adding for 5 years now. When we presented about Perkins and our comprehensive local needs assessment, we've been talking about this. This is a program that is geared towards sophomores. There would be a total of 16 seats that would be available where they would have the opportunity to explore all of the career pathways offered within Stafford. So there's an application process that we have to do with the Vermont Agency of Education that you all granted us permission to move forward with last year. And so as part of that, we had to prepare a scope and sequence, and one of the requirements of the the program application is that both our regional advisory board and the governing board, which is you, have seen it and approved that because Rutland City is the one that determines credits. These are the credits that the AOE recommends.
For the sophomore year.
For the program. And as part of the scope and sequence, we had to provide evidence to the agency, and they have approved the credits that we have requested. We received that yesterday. And so now we just need this final piece. So we're excited. And those 16 seats would be split among all of our partner schools.
Cool.
Wait a second. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Ready for next one?
Ready, fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 26.
First motion there, I move to accept the recommendation to use reserve funds for building updates during fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 26, not to exceed $160,000 for building improvements.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Fiscal year 26.
I move to accept the federal Carl D. Perkins grant for fiscal year 26 for the use in support of the operation of Stafford Technical Center with an anticipated award amount of $346,833.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That is awesome.
And last, move to accept the fiscal year 26 Stafford Technical Center budget as presented with total expenditures of $7,256,162, resulting in a total tuition of $22,260.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your hard work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Crazy stuff.
She's been busy.
I was gonna say, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Several of those meetings. It seems so fast. 2 months of meetings. And then all of a sudden.
I seconded one of them.
One of them was Stephanie, yeah, and one of them was Courtney. Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Somebody
okay.
did something.
Yes, yeah. I'm sorry, Bill. I forgot we were doing that. Yeah. Karen's always quick to make sure we're keeping on, that we're moving. Love it. It's good.
It is. Good. I felt the power for a little bit. It was great.
Hi. And we have the fiscal year 26 budget proposal.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time tonight. Tim Smith and I are going to give you an update on where we are with our schedule for the fiscal 26 budget. Tim and I have been working with quite a few other members of the business office to vet the details of our latest proposal. And of course, we appreciate the efforts of all those people who are here. materials tonight. I just want to start off before we get into the specifics of reminding everyone that we typically take what we call a zero-based budgeting approach, which means we start off each budget cycle working with the administration and senior leaders to build up what we think will be the necessary budgetary funds in order to meet the anticipated programming needs for the coming year. For this cycle, which we started having those conversations basically in September, we did not anticipate any significant changes in programming, either in terms of additions or deletions. And so you heard us begin speaking about a level service budget scenario as the starting point for our work. Of course, as we get into this over the period of a number of months, we invariably find efficiency opportunities, and having conversations with various members of the administration, we're able to test, certain assumptions and determine whether there are opportunities to take further cost savings. We are still going to be exploring some of those. What we're going to present tonight is I think in the ballpark and very close, but at the same time you'll see preliminary, the words preliminary boldly across a number of pages, because over the next several weeks, even if you don't give us any different guidance this evening, Tim and myself and other members of the administration will be spending a great deal of time trying to fine-tune these estimates and respond to additional incoming information that we expect to, be changing over the next few weeks. For example, on Friday, Tim and I are going to go to a monthly meeting of the state business officers. The AOE representatives typically attend that, and that's a wonderful opportunity to exchange updates and information. So with that, let me mention a few high-level messages, which are on the first page. So we have talked about a general target from the beginning of trying to keep our total expenditures for the school district in the range of $67 million or less. That would represent a 5% increase. We still see that as achievable. And as I said, the next few weeks we're going to be working hard to see what additional opportunities we can find to get there. We're currently at $67.2 million, as you'll see. Very importantly, this proposed budget does include several $100,000 of funding for key projects that various directors of our services in the administration believe need to get started in the course of fiscal 26. You've heard us talk about the need for a district-wide phone system replacement and upgrade project. You've heard Glenn talk about the importance of modernizing some of our elevator equipment, and also potentially begin a replacement of some aging lights at Alumni Field, which will, of course, bring with it energy efficiency savings. So these are probably going to be 2-year projects at the least, and so we're going to get those started in fiscal 26, and we've included the money to do so, even though, of course, it would be easy to leave that out in order to keep the budget as tight as possible. We're keeping an eye on doing the work that needs to progress. There's a lot of controversy right now about the outlook for federal grant funding. And of course, some of that has to do with a lot of uncertainty legislatively at the federal level. But what we're hearing so far, based on our specific grants, as we'll show you, is that there's a modestly favorable outlook for a bit of an increase, unlike what we expected going from fiscal 24 to fiscal 25. We'll talk a little bit about that. It's going to help us if this scenario turns out to be correct. If not, we'll of course have some options in our bags here that we can use to respond if we need to. Of course, one of the big uncertainties right now is that salary negotiations are still ongoing with the teachers. You might recall that I've mentioned in the past that of our $65 million or so annual budget, close to $20 million of that is for teacher salaries alone. So how those negotiations go can be a material driver of the overall budget. Our average education spending per pupil, and I don't want to get into a tutorial, but I do want to encourage you to focus on those several important words.
education spending per pupil, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. It's looking, based on our projections right now, that for fiscal 26, that could actually be within several percentage points of where we are for this budget year, which was $12,400. And that would be very encouraging, because education spending per pupil is one of the key drivers when it comes time to calculating homestead property tax rates, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Finally, in the coming week, we should be getting a preliminary report from the Commission on the Future of Public Education in Vermont. The legislation, the yield bill that established this commission, set December 15th as a deadline for it to come out with preliminary findings and potentially even preliminary recommendations. You heard Bill mention a few minutes ago some of the work that they have ongoing to develop some ideas and implementation plans, probably building upon what the AOE has been hearing as the new secretary, Zoe Saunders, has been conducting the Listen and Learn tours throughout the state. So that's the basic overview, and before I proceed, let me ask if you have any questions or comments about that. Okay, great. So on the boring side, or more boring side, depending on how you look at it, I just want to highlight something about our ballot language, because when Tim and I come back to you about a month from now on January 14, and we ask you as a school board to consider approving our final and formal budget proposal, as you might recall, we will also ask you to approve ballot language. The yield bill back in the spring of this year, H887, established this year's ballot language, as the yield bill typically does. The language is very similar to what we have seen and used. It's basically almost identical to what Rutland City Public Schools has been using. There was an option, as you might recall, in the last few years where the legislators gave options to use different language. We chose as a district not to vary from the traditional, and guess what? We came back to those basics. What's interesting about this is twofold, in my opinion. First, you're only going to be focused on approving 3 numbers that go into this ballot language. Of course, you'll be expected to understand all of the numbers that go behind those and support them. And those are the total expenditures. So basically what this is doing is, it's basically a voter authorization to say, yes, we authorize the school board we authorize the school district per the board's recommendation to approve $67 million or whatever you decide to agree upon in total. Then the district asks its voters to say, by the way, if you approve, that will result in, and here come these words again, per pupil education spending of X dollars, which is a certain percentage above or below the spending for the prior year. Now, that seems simple enough, right? But what I do want to make sure we're all aware of, so we'll be on the same page come January, is that this ballot language this same article uses 2 different definitions of spending or expenditures. And so the first paragraph, when it says we authorize total expenditures of X, which, by the way, for this fiscal year is $63.8 million, that's what you can describe as total expenditures, top line. That's everything before you have any grants, credits, or whatever. Okay, that seems reasonable. Then when you get to the second paragraph, however, the language and the definitions that are being used when it comes time to calculate average spending per pupil refers to a different concept called education spending. And that education spending concept basically is what the state of Vermont has to fund. The difference between total expenditures and education spending in the current budget year for our district is $22 million, as you can see in the inset box below. And it basically represents the amount of federal and other grants that we get to pay for a number of our activities. Title grants, for example, are a familiar source of these, that obviously the state of Vermont taxpayers don't have to worry about. And that's why sometimes we say to our administrative friends and colleagues, if you want to if you want to bring a new program forward, and you want to spend an additional $1 million on that new program, and if the superintendent agrees, the budget office is fine with that, as long as you bring $1 million plus one of federal spending. In other words, you keep it neutral from a local spending standpoint. This is a really important concept, and the other thing too is that the pupil count that's used is something that the AOE defines called long-term weighted average daily membership, which for this district in the current year is 3,377 and change. So let me stop there and ask if this is understandable or if I've confused people. You look like you're going to ask something, Justine.
The long-term daily average, can you say that again, and can you explain it?
Long-term weighted average daily membership.
Yeah, what's the membership to? What club is that?
It's the club that says, if you want Vermont to send you money, you have to comply with their rules and regulations and calculate things this way. When this is a relatively new term. It was implemented for the fiscal 25 budget. You might recall from previous years the reference to term equalized pupils or weighted equalized pupils, which was the old basis before Act 127 was passed. And as I shared with the board at one point, with just a touch of skepticism, I said, I think it's not a good sign in terms of complexity that we're moving from a 2-word definition called equalized pupils to a 6-word definition called long-term weighted average daily membership. But it is what it is, and I think we have a pretty good understanding of it. If you are interested in more details at some point, Tim or I would be glad to share the gory details with you. But it's working out right now so that it's advantageous for this district because it gives more weight than in the past to providing funding for students who perhaps have English as their second language, or perhaps they're coming from families that are of lower income or below the poverty line. Those typically weren't funded to the extent that they are now being funded with these new metrics. We're particularly happy with that. If that answers your question for now.
For now. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Fair enough.
Ted?
Yes.
Courtney?
Yes.
When you talk about that, thank you. When you talk money, I black out a little bit. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So the federal spending money we get that's not coming from the taxes is the 20 million.
So.
Did I catch that right, or am I wrong?
You're almost.
I'm close.
Right.
Okay.
You're close. The only nuance that I will add to that is that 20 million does come from taxes.
Okay.
It comes from taxes that all of us have sent to Washington, D.C. in our federal income taxes. And then what happens is the U.S. Department of Education decides we're going to give some of that back to you, okay, through various grants. For example, you might hear of called the title grants, Title I, Title II, Title IV. Those are big consolidated federal programs that do get administered through the Vermont Department of Education, and Tim and others work really, really hard with Bianca to make sure we get as many of those funds as we can. But the source of those funds are the tax dollars we have already spent, we have already sent as U.S. taxpayers, not as Vermont taxpayers.
Right. Got it.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because a lot of people, until you get into the nitty-gritty, and oftentimes there's no need to until it's confusion. Most people,
nothing's free, is what I'm hearing you say. Okay.
Free.
Darn it.
Got it.
Anybody who tells you that, don't believe it. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, great. Okay. Now, I don't like this chart. I'm showing it to you. And I don't like this chart because it has a lot of numbers on it. But I have it here because it gives you a few basic concepts. Don't worry about all the numbers. What I want to do is walk you through the concepts, okay? So what we see here is fiscal 25, the current budget year. Then we see fiscal 26 preliminary, and then a couple of comments about that. And the reason I have this here is to message to you, so there's that top line, that total expenditures again, the $63.8 million we have for this year, and $67.2 million is about where we are. So it looks like it's up about 5%. Tim and I are going to keep working really hard to get that number under 67 if we can, and lower if we can. Then, of course, we subtract off those federal grants and other revenues and various reimbursements that we were talking about that the Vermont taxpayers don't have to fund directly right now because we've already sent those dollars to Washington. And what's interesting here is that when we go grant by grant, we're seeing the possibility that Rutland City Public Schools could see a bit of an increase in those federal grants, to the tune of over 10% year to year. Now, just for your interest, you say, well, wait a minute, I've heard federal grant funding could be down, it's not likely to go up, but a lot of it depends on the grants you have, and as Rob Bliss would always tell us, you sometimes qualify for a greater share of title grants if certain metrics are going in your favor. For example, the percentage of poverty is an example. Another case that's driving our results for 26 is Marie Gilman, our executive director of Tapestry and Epic, has been working very hard and done a lot of great resourceful work to get additional grants, and that is adding several $100,000 to the estimates for 26. So it's a lot of pieces, a couple of big pieces, but when you have that grant number going up by 11%, which is a greater percentage than total expenditures, guess what happens? The leftover, the education spending that Vermont has to provide, doesn't go up by as large a percentage. So right now, we're expecting that education spending to go up by approximately 2% or $1 million. We haven't had a favorable development like that for a few years. We're hoping that it maintains, but this is where we are right now. I'll explain to you the implications in a moment. Just so you'll see, full-time FTEs, full-time equivalent employees, we had held those flat at 495 positions in 24 and 25. As we're beginning to look a little bit more closely at some opportunities, working with the administration, we see some opportunities to potentially make a few modest reductions in our total staffing. 491 is the number we have on the page today as of December 10th, very preliminary. It will look different, most likely, when we come in January, but I don't expect it to be materially different. But directionally, it makes sense to us, if that declines about 1%, that's out of line with the trend in student enrollment, which again now, we've talked about student metrics, but one report that we do for ourselves within the district is we take enrollment reports several times a year in terms of students in the classroom, and as you can see, looking at October to October results, those were also down about 1%. So, any questions about how those factors are relating together? Yes.
Ted, you mentioned, I think you mentioned last week at our meeting that well, I guess my question is, part of this 11% up on the federal grants and other revenues, you said there's some metrics are moving in our favor. Is that what you kind of said? Something what you implied?
But for example, the big piece of that is, like I said, some of the work that Marie has done. That's bringing in approximately $300,000 to $400,000 more in revenues year over year. We have programs like Triple E where that's going up about $100,000. There are a number of grants where, based upon the dynamics of things that are happening, those numbers are going up. Another example is because some of the, and this will be a helpful point, because some of the IT expenditures that Patricia directs and programs that she helps to manage, some of those qualify for federal reimbursement. Like if you meet a certain set of criteria, these expenditures for equipment or networking can be reimbursed federally by 80%, up to 80%. So if those expenditures go up a little bit, your reimbursement, which appears on that line, is going to go up. And that's $100,000 or two right there for this year to year. So you're going to see expenditures going up on the expense line when we get to that chart, but just keep in mind that there are offsetting revenues that don't necessarily offset 100% of that in all cases, but that are a help.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
When we spoke about the families filling out the paperwork for free and reduced lunch, as well as the Medicaid, right? That has to do with long-term weighted average daily membership.
I have a chart to come.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait.
I wish
Thank
I could
you.
go to it right now.
No, it's okay. I can be patient. I can be patient.
Hold
Thank you.
on and we'll
Okay,
get there
good.
in a moment, because it's a really important question.
Yes, okay, thank you.
I'm going to make us go through every number.
Perfect. I can't wait. I love numbers.
What are you doing?
Sorry, you're right.
What's happening here?
Don't you love numbers?
I'm over it.
I'm over it.
5 o'clock.
By 5 o'clock,
I'm over it, yeah.
All right.
I didn't fulfill my dream. I'm not a math teacher.
She's done.
Yeah, right.
See all the colors.
I can't wait,
Love to
my
use
either.
them in Excel.
Me too.
Okay, I'll be patient.
I
Thank
have
you.
one more question.
Please.
Most of this looks incredible. Similar to Courtney, I have like a struggle to understand this.
Actually, that's a sign of being well-balanced and healthy.
Thank you.
So,
Appreciate that.
I'm most concerned about the bottom two numbers outside of the box, where we see a loss of 4 full-time employees and a loss of only 24 students. It's hard to imagine that 1% of a decrease in our budget is worth the impact on our students with 4 less full-time employees. I know that the numbers have gone down, but I know we have an increase in refugee population. I know we're constantly looking at our proficiencies in math and ELA, and maybe it's not you who makes that decision on who's let go or what positions we don't fill. I just want it
well, that's
less
a really
of a
good
question, more of a
No,
that makes me nervous.
You know what? And it's really, really important that any board member or member of the public voice those questions and concerns. And so let me try to address it up front and then ask Bill if he would like to add anything to this, okay?
Okay.
So, you know, we try and be as specific as we can in terms of the numbers that we're working with today. Now, at the same time, what I'm going to tell you is I would encourage that none of us, at least I follow this advice myself, it's important to pay attention to the detail, but not get hung up on the detail. And what I mean by that is to say, okay, so as of right now in our system, we've got funding for 491 employees. But recognize that across approximately 1,800 plus students, that involves a lot of different allocations of various areas of teaching, para-education, staffing, this and that. And what you're paying Bill to do, and Bianca, and a lot of the people sitting in back of me, is to make wise professional decisions in terms of what do we need to meet the needs that we see not only right now but anticipate for the coming year. And at the same time, our job, because the taxpayers are among our constituents and stakeholders, is to say, well, if we don't think we need all of those teachers or staff members, you know, then you say, well, maybe I'm going to defund that. So an example, you heard an example already tonight from Stafford, right? So STC, based upon the approval of its regional advisory board and the relatively low student enrollment, has decided to, at least for the coming year, discontinue that program. And there's one funded position for 26 that's now going to come out of the budget.
Yep.
Is that a bad thing? Are we going to be worried about the student impact? Well, maybe. But it's done in a context of balancing resources and needs.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say I have a cup on my windowsill, which is stay calm and trust in your superintendent, and that's what we do as a team. So I think your questions are very legitimate. Anytime you're going to be cutting, you have to ask what are the impacts. But what we have done, at least in the time that several years I've been here, is we don't manage just for the current year. We're managing for the current year and the year after that and the year after that to keep a sustainable cost structure. And so when we have natural attrition, for example, and not all of the reductions necessarily going to be natural attrition, but if we have 10 people who are going to be retiring this year, one of the questions that we always ask is, do we need to fill each one of those positions, or can we readjust and rebalance? This is some of the natural rebalancing going on, and what I would say to you is, you're probably going to feel better, if I can manage to finish persuading you, when you see modest changes year to year, instead of like, now we're cutting 10% of positions. Because if you keep up with things over time and try and maintain some general alignment with where you want to be and where you want to go, that allows the organization to operate in a much more consistent, stable, and robust way. I don't know, Bill, do you want to add to that? Or?
I don't know if I could attend. That was good. I think what we're really trying to do, his last phrase that he used, modest changes year to year, is what we've been trying to do. So, you know, maybe 2 years ago we were like, enrollment went down a little bit, maybe class sizes went down a little bit, maybe we could make a cut, but let's not do anything drastic. And then you get to the point where this year, here's a retirement, or here's a position that's not been filled, and you know what, we could make that cut right now and not harm anybody, and keep programming basically the same. So that's what we're shooting for every year, and we go around to the principals and we say, this is where do you have space, where do we think would make sense without really gutting any programming. That's how our process is.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment because it's interesting, the perception of numbers and what people see. And when you said that, I thought, wow, that's like completely not what I was taking from that. And I'm not saying that
and we have
in a
very
way,
different
but
backgrounds coming into
different
this.
backgrounds, right? Yeah, so it's perception, and maybe this is because I look at numbers a lot. So it's perception on the numbers, right? So there could be a lot of things happening behind that. I didn't pick up on maybe that more of a, I don't want to say negative or dire situation. I'm thinking, oh, good. Maybe we had some overages here and people retired and we didn't fill them, and that's good. I didn't make a direct correlation as like you had done. So that I thought it was interesting how I think people can learn from the perception of numbers aren't necessarily what you're picking up. It could be something completely different and not have a direct correlation to that. Because I'm thinking, oh, well, that's good. We kind of scaled down maybe, and we didn't have to hire because people were retiring versus maybe moving on or something, so they retired. I'm putting more of a maybe positive spin on that, and then the student population just has been declining over time, so it kind of was just a natural thing that might be occurring. So it was interesting. I didn't have that in my head, and then you said it, I was like, wow, it's interesting how we all have different spins on the numbers. That's all. I just wanted to kind of pick that up. That it's not necessarily a negative connotation.
And perspective are so important.
Yeah, it's not necessarily maybe a negative thing. It could be a good thing. Yeah.
So I think the taxpayers are going to want to know those 4 positions, where is the savings in the budget?
The savings is in the compensation line, which is salaries and benefits.
Right, but the budget is still going up 5%. The overall.
I'm going to show you why.
Okay.
And the budget would go up by more than that if
we had those 4. Yeah.
And so, Karen, just to kind of keep in mind as one example, that just to reference back to what we've talked about, is we have to remember, for example, that while we're happy, relatively speaking, that medical plan premium costs are only going up by 11.9% on average for the coming year.
Have you gotten a confirmed number or no from the state?
Yes and no. All right. I don't like to try and be evasive, but I like to try and answer carefully, which is the number that we have, that 11.9%, is the rate that VHI has filed for. Okay, that filing will probably not be formally approved by the state until February. It's typically January, February. I mean, things take time, right?
But then how are districts supposed to do their budgets?
By making judicious assumptions and hiring very talented people like Tim and me. And then the answer is, kidding aside, the answer is we have to make educated guesses. And then every once in a while we'll get pieces of information that say, oh, gee, maybe we need to revise that. But we work with the information that we have. And what we always try to do is avoid driving past our headlights. I'm not going to make an assumption unless I have reason to do that. So as of right now, the rationale is they filed for 11.9%. We have developed our budget assuming 11.9%. Okay? Historically, there's not many times when there's a substantial difference between the approved rate and the filing rate, which makes sense if they've done the filing correctly and substantiated. Could there be a change in early 25 that's much different? Sure, there could be, in which case then we have to adjust. And that's one of the reasons that, we have to stay on top of things and say preliminary until it's final. Most people don't realize that things aren't final in terms of the way they
right, but I mean, we have to have the budget done by the end of January.
We do.
And if they're not going to put it out in February.
So what that says is, as an example, not to belabor this particular point, but it's a good example of the ongoing, what I say is, we budget all year long.
Right.
Because if there are changes in the assumptions, then we may have to say, oh, guess what? It didn't come in at 11.9, it came in at 13.9. Now what are we going to do? Because the district is going to have to find a way to fund those costs, and we may have to make some other changes. But if we've done our job properly, of working closely with a lot of the people sitting behind here and throughout the rest of the district to put together as tight and as solid a budget as we can, then we will have some degrees of freedom. And because there are things that change plus and minus all throughout the year. And one of the things that Tim and I do is working with our colleagues is we do the best job that we can to stay on top of those changes, realize when they're happening, and then we don't present it to you, but we've got basically quarterly outlooks. You know, what has changed? Is there anything we need to react to? So
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah. Tim, do you want to say anything else about that in terms of the uncertainty? And, you know, we work with the information we have, and we'll get more information probably on Friday. And
yeah, there's unfortunately a lot of unknowns, and things that we do know are likely to change. I mean, Ted is zeroing in on our total expenditures and offsetting revenues, which then we arrive at education spending, but then the next function is the long-term weighted average daily membership. Now, the first release a couple of weeks ago was very favorable to us, but that's going to get refined and re-released a few more times. You know, once we get that finalized, then we have our spending per pupil, which you then compare to the yield, right? So the initial yield as part of the December 1st letter was $8,553. Typically, that changes 4, 5, 6 times throughout the year and is oftentimes not finalized until the end of June, right before the legislative break. Okay, and once we know that, we then have to apply the common level of appraisal, you know, the function of the assessed value of the properties in the city against the market value. The common level of appraisal is expected to be released towards the end of this month. So there are 3 key variables which we either don't know or are subject to change, which is ultimately going to, you know, define the homestead tax rate and whether people's taxes go up or down. So we're just trying to focus on the things that
I just think that the state is putting us at a disadvantage before we even start.
You work with what you have.
Yeah, and can I say that, you know, I think Ted and Tim, you both do a really good job being, you have reasonable expectations, you know, and you try and make sure that the program stays intact. At the same time, in conjunction with the finance committee, we're all talking about these things and being as transparent as we can, and you have a great appreciation for the taxpayer.
Right.
And what that looks like. So I think that we have that, we make sure, we're mindful of all of that. Yeah, we're mindful of all of that between the finance committee and the budget talks that we're, you know, discussing all the numbers. We have the whole package that we consider. So I think that's, to your credits, that, you know, what a great job that you guys do to keep maintaining that in a environment where there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yes, and to Karen's point again, it's one of the reasons, Karen, you're touching upon reasons why we try and resist from saying, when people come to us understandably anxious to say, what's my tax rate going to be? What's my tax rate going to be? And you've heard me say it before, it's like, I really don't want to start down that road yet, because any number I tell you right now is going to be different. And it's probably going to change several times. And unlike what the governor did on December 1st of 23 and came out and said, the average is going to be an increase of 18.5%, well, we know what happened after that, the meltdowns that occurred. So, you know, I try and tell people, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk in terms of what we know. And then we budget to what the school district needs for its students. If these things happen, as Tim was describing, as we get into the spring, if there are unfavorable implications for what would happen to the taxpayer, then we're going to have another conversation. You know, and say, okay, what do I need to do without hurting the students if we can avoid doing that? So yeah, it's a very dynamic world with a lot of things that we typically don't bore you with. But one of the reasons we're talking about them today is because it's now especially uncertain.
And my comments were not intended to reflect on either of you. I'm overly pleased with how you guys do it. I just am concerned about the state, not, you know, especially in the times that we're in right now, where people are having a hard time paying their taxes and affording them. And I think to not give them accurate numbers is not fair, and it's not being transparent.
Sure.
Not on our part, but because we have to rely on what the state is saying.
And so we rely on that, and then we rely upon our own experience and our judgment to say, okay, I'm gonna look past some of this stuff, because I think my experience tells me this is what I'm going to do. You know, am I wrong occasionally? Yeah, we'd be wrong, but we just make the best effort, so. You know, it's not a perfect system, but they're gonna try and revise it, I guess. We'll find out more on the 15th. Okay, let me move on. I apologize, but let me just tell you. So now, a couple more budget metrics, and then I'll pick up the pace here. So we've talked about long-term weighted average daily membership. That number for 25 was 3377 and change. As Tim pointed out, we've received one release of what, you know, an initial calculation is for 26. I'm not putting it up on the page because I know it's going to change and I have no idea which direction it's going to change in. So I put 4 question marks after, you know, making a placeholder. So, well, let's assume that it stays the same for a moment. So my question is, if by putting 4 question marks, is that sufficiently emphatic to tell me this is really preliminary? But it's reasonable, see, kind of going down the avenue that Karen was exploring a little bit. Well, what do I know and what can I assume reasonably? Well, if I were to make an assumption based today on just the fact that, well, if that stays unchanged, then what would that mean based upon the numbers that we've already shared with you this evening in terms of education spending per pupil? Well, if it stays the same at $33.77, then that says that the average cost per pupil of education would go up to about $12,700. And I will guarantee you that won't be the number. But as a placeholder, it says, well, at least for now, that's not a bad place to be. And then we'll see what happens with the subsequent iterations. Any questions about that? We'll keep you posted, of course. If anything dramatic changes, we'll let you know. Okay, so let's go on here. This speaks to a point that Tim was making earlier, you know, when he was talking about the yield, which is so important for tax rate calculations. So the funny part about this is when the initial yield estimate came out on December 1st of last year at $9,452, it wasn't that far off from where it ended up in the spring when they passed the yield bill in June at $99,893. But it was sort of a roller coaster ride in between. There was a $3,000 range of different numbers. You can imagine, you know, for how many minutes my heart stopped, you know, earlier this year when I found out that the Joint Fiscal Office was making models based on $7,000 instead of, you know, the $9,000 or $10,000 you'd seen before. But at the same time, you wait and see what's going to happen. And the mathematics suggested that there's no way they could get by with that. It would just have thrown too much hurt to too many people. But the point here is there's so much variability that I don't think it's productive to be basically guessing what the tax rate's going to be. That's just what I would encourage you to do. Now, the favorite chart that Mary Beth was asking about. Okay, as Tim pointed out, we just got our first review of long-term weighted average daily membership. Why, in heaven's name, did I put this chart in the package? And it's simply to illustrate to you that behind that one number that we talked about a moment ago, 3,377.57, there are many, many metrics that go behind this. And we have a lot of people here within the administration, including Carolyn Babbitt, our registrar, and others, who collect data during the fall, who send data up to the AOE. They do different things with it. They look at it. They massage it. We develop colorful charts. But there's a lot of people who spend a lot of time and effort over months to gather and to validate, to revise, to report the data that AOE eventually uses to try and calculate that one number. And as Tim said, typically there are several iterations. So just because you see one number and just because it looks official, don't assume that it's like the number and it's solid, because it's going to change. And there's one number in there on the right-hand side that I think Mary Beth was asking about, the free and reduced lunch count, which on the initial iteration for our district has come out to be 1,469. That's like at least a few hundred higher than what we expected and what we have seen in past years, which raises a question. Does that mean that I undercounted in previous years? Maybe I did. Or does it mean I'm overcounting this year? I don't know. But that metric is going to have a significant impact on what the long-term weighted average daily membership is. And right now, there are a lot of business managers and AOE people running around trying to figure out what's going on with FRL. And hopefully, we're going to learn more on Friday. But I'm just sharing this with you. We typically don't get into this, but I just want to emphasize how many numbers go into all of this stuff, you know? And I wish I was smart enough to be able to recommend to AOE a new model that was simpler and more transparent that would get to a good result. I'm not that smart. We're just in a situation where we've got a mechanism and a process that's like super complicated because it's going up this way over time. So consider, as I always tell, you know, the folks I work with, consider the source. Before you really believe in a number, think about what's behind it. Any questions or comments? Yes.
What is, you said the free and reduced lunch is the FRL. What is EL?
The English learner.
Thank you.
Yes, Karen.
I may regret asking this, but
Or I may
or
regret
you
asking.
may. If all of the students in our district get reduced lunch or free lunch, how is this a proper number?
I'm not going to answer that question because I'm not capable of giving you a really thorough, intelligent answer. I think I know the answer, but I don't know, and I'm not going to guess. Any of my colleagues want to take that one on. It has to do with the criteria that we get from AOE, the form, and this is the rubric, and it says you will count students meeting these criteria in this way, which may be totally different from who actually gets the free lunch.
Okay, so it's not counting based on who is actually getting the free lunch. It's saying these students qualify for free lunch based on their parents' income.
I believe that's correct. Okay. Which is why you'll hear me, quote that saying from Mark Twain that there are three kinds of lies, statistics. There are three kinds of statistics: lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? Because if you don't ask what's behind this stuff, it may seem to be one thing, but it might very well be another.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, so that's really a credit to the AOE, though, because I will tell you, the AOE, they don't get paid enough for all the hard work that they do, and I don't know how they keep it all together, because there's so much going on. So, okay, now, let's run through revenues really quickly. I'm over my time, and I apologize, but I appreciate your questions very much. So, there are several different major sources of revenues, but what you see here is the fact that we're anticipating that those federal and other revenues, which is the component that reduces our total expenditures down to a net education spending by Vermont, we're looking at that going up by a significant percentage more than we've seen in the past. One line that I put on there, and I typically only show you 2 years. This time I wanted to show 3 so you could see trends back to 24 to 25, 26. For a period of time, we had not raised our tuition fees that we charge to other schools who send their students to us. And we got to the point where, at least I felt, and others can disagree with me, but I felt like we were undercharging relative to our average costs, which to me was tantamount to a subsidy by the Rutland City taxpayer of other people coming into our school. So I said, well, I don't like that arrangement. I want to be fair to the Rutland City taxpayers. I don't want to drive students away, but I want to have some pricing that's a little bit more representative of what our current average costs are. So we got some blowback when we raised the tuitions by some significant percentages over the last few years. The actual, that budget for 25, that was actually a low number. It came in higher than that, so the difference year to year is not going to be as significant when you look at actual to budget. But what we're probably going to come forward to recommend to Bill later this month is we think we're aligned with where we need to be. And so we're planning, you'll get a chance to take a shot at this in January, probably not going to increase tuition year to year. We continue where we need to be. We're not trying to overcharge anybody, we just want to be fair to everybody. Any questions about the revenues? We've even talked about a lot of these elements already. Okay, great. Costs. So, again, typically I only show you 2 years. I'm showing you 3 so you can see some trends if you're interested. And so, if you look at those total expenses, this is that top line. The 24 numbers that you're seeing at the far right, they exclude ESSER. Okay, they exclude $13.5 million of ESSER expenses and grants were taken out of the revenue because it wouldn't be apples to apples if we had included that stuff. So all that was stripped out so you could see a more continuous trend. And as you can see there, going from 24 to 25, our total expenditures went up about 5%. And we're expecting approximately another 5% increase this year. Just a couple of basic comments. That special education line, you'll see, that's increasing, if we're right, that's going to increase about $500,000 year to year. But I want you to know that that's not net to the bottom line, so to speak, because we're getting additional reimbursements for some high-cost services that are driving that number up. So we're getting notionally, over $300,000 more of additional credits to help pay for that. So you kind of have to look at both pieces together. And as Pam has told me in the past, these numbers will go up and down for special ed, just depending upon the mix of students you have in a given year and the mix of services that they need. And you saw one year not that long ago, they were more in the $1 million range. Maybe in 27 they'll be down. That's what Pam figures out every year for us. We had asked Glenn to try and give us a little bit of savings on the buildings, grounds, and transportations, and he's done that. We're still talking about some potential savings that he thinks he might be able to free up if we need that. Food service, we think is going to be about flat because we bid that package and the bid was pretty competitive. Let me see briefly. I'm going to tell you right now, the utilities and the other lines, they're really tight. And they're probably too low, but we're trying to shoot low right now. For example, for utilities, petroleum costs are down a little bit. Our wood pellet costs are down $2.50 a ton. So, depending upon what you want to assume in terms of, degree days, in terms of cold and stuff, we're going to try and keep that flat to down. So we have more work to do there, but this is where we are right now in terms of total cost. Let me stop and ask, so you can ask questions. Yes?
What would fit into other?
What would fit into other? So, for example, that's where we put for, if you look at the fiscal 25 column for the budget, that 2160, that had $450,000 in it, in the budget, for the field turf replacement. And the number, the 1850 next to it, had $250,000. So now that has about $300,000 for new projects, which means we're trying to back out, other sorts of miscellaneous costs. It's typically things like, just trying to think of a couple of good examples. There's a lot of little things, it's not your direct instructional costs, obviously, but that's why we're looking there, because typically there are some things that you can find to cut, whether it's dues or subscriptions or other things like that. They're little pieces, but if you find enough of them, you can save some money. Any other? Yes, Charlene.
Just a kind of a quick question. It looks like you're comparing the budgets from the year prior to the current, and I'm just curious about the actual versus, so...
You are the first person in my 4.5 years who has ever asked about the comparison to actual, so I wish I could ring that bell over there and give you the prize.
Well, that's what I would do. I don't know, so I feel better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, we're on the same page.
And just because we don't want to confuse people, we have not done actuals, but when we come back to the Finance Committee later this year and we look at first quarter, which runs July, August, September, have those results I'll take care of. We will be talking about actuals, and in fact, even though we don't put it on the chart, Tim and I and the others, we do look at the actuals really hard to say, okay, well, wait a minute. In fact, with that, look at that top line there, direct instructional program, excluding salaries and benefits. And you see that's down to 3.4 million from 3.7 in the budget. Well, part of the reason for that is the actual came in at 3.5.
The budget might not necessarily be the outcome.
It was over, for whatever reasons, we over budgeted, we included some things that didn't come to pass. So now we're saying, oh, look, there was some money that we didn't spend in actual in 24. Maybe we can replicate some further savings and cut another 100,000 out of it. So even though it's not on the
but
chart,
you're doing that.
we look at that. Yeah, because that is truly, and for everybody else's benefit, the importance of your question is, that's truly the latest, best data point.
Yeah, okay.
Thank
I
you.
didn't even think of that, Shirley. Good call.
Heck yeah.
4.5 years, I was waiting for something.
Well, I was like, what?
Like, I trust
There
that
you
you are
go.
doing that. It just never occurred to me to like
Okay, I'm just
put
having
that
fun.
question.
I'm just having
This is
fun.
good conversation.
So there's an item financing,
Mm.
and it went down a lot from 24 to 25. And
It
now,
did.
is that interest, or what exactly is financing?
Financing is principal and interest payments on the various debt issues that the district has. And, you know, we've got a footnote that we put into the annual financial statements that show all of our listings, and that's a really good catch, and that's one of the key points. So you're right, it went down, wow, 1.4 million down to, you know, it dropped in half, basically. Interest rates didn't go down. A very large bond issue that we had for like 8 years or more matured, and it dropped off the schedule. So that's what caused, so going from 24 to 25, that big change was we no longer had the annual principal and interest payments for that. And our debt schedule is very predictable because all of the district's debt is fixed rate. We have no floating rate debt, okay? But that's the way we do it. So just so you'll know, that financing line of $700 this coming year, in fiscal '27, that's going to drop another $85,000 when another debt issue rolls off. So that number will go down over time until such time as the district asks for voter approval to add any debt issues.
Thank you.
Sure, thanks to you. It's a good question.
And to flip to that, what was, and I think I know the answer, but I'm not gonna, IT, 24 budget to 25 budget, it went up.
Which one? Which line are you looking at?
IT,
Yep.
went from 755
So you
to
think you
11.
know the answer, so tell us.
No, I'm not.
Oh, come on, you stepped on it. Come on, let's go. No, it was basically, it was cybersecurity, for example.
It was oh, Jesus. It was so it was a new program.
It was a number of new programs and also some updated spending for, you know, we periodically have to do some network upgrades, some hardware upgrades.
I knew the yeah.
Yes, and also to your point, because it's a really good question, is that 755, you know, that benefited from the fact that in '24, when we still had ESSER,
right,
we were able to utilize that funding to do some things that were beneficial. One of them was we purchased a fairly, a six-figure subscription cost cyber security program, and we said, we'll use ESSER money to buy it the first year, see if we like it, and if we don't, we'll drop it. But we thought it was a great thing, and thank goodness we did it. And so that was one of the reasons why, well, that switched to local in '25. So the things that you are remembering are the key drivers. I will say, I don't know if she's sitting back of me, but I will say Patricia does a great job of keeping a really sharp pencil.
I knew there was a reason, I just had
Yep,
to
you were exactly
remember
right.
it.
And then, we try and keep to a fairly routine cycle of hardware and equipment replaces and networking replaces, but every once in a while you'll get a point where you say, oh gee, I've got to rework that wiring closet. It's going to cost me $100,000. But you do it to keep the computers running. Any other questions? I mean, unfortunately for you, I can talk about this all night.
We know.
So, last thing, communication plans. Communication plan, very, very important. So this district has a great story in terms of its educational experiences, and I believe its fiscal story, given the reasonable, responsible approach we've been taking. But it doesn't matter if our constituents don't hear it and don't understand it. So we've been talking in the Finance Committee about some various communications plans that we can undertake. And, Patricia and the IT team have told me, for example, that we can create a question and answer form and hang it out on the school finance landing page of the website, and thereby enable district residents who might want to submit a budget question online to do that. So we're going to bring that up in the next few weeks. We've talked about invoking some public meetings starting after you approve our budget, hopefully, on January 14th, and we could set up a schedule of those meetings. I mean, the first one I think that would be on the list would hopefully be the Board of Aldermen and Alderwomen's going to invite us to come speak to them in January, and then of course in March we get the voter information session, and maybe in between we decide we can schedule some group meetings in the community. And then we're going to post some other information resources that, learning from other schools that have already done it, some excellent tutorials and reference information. So, but if you have other ideas, or if you have groups that you suggest we meet with, you know, we go talk to Rotary, we talk to others. One year we talked to young professionals. So anybody who that we can go talk to, we'll make the time to go in February once the budget's passed.
This is going to be a question for Melissa. So, since we do not have a video communications anymore, what area at Stafford or the high school could help us with that 7-minute video if we go that route?
Well, it already exists. It's already out on YouTube.
Oh, never mind then.
But they could probably do it better. But this one is just out there. We could just hang the link.
Okay.
Trying to make your job easier, Melissa. Okay, that's all I had.
I actually wanted to spend the next 45 minutes talking about the other.
We're going to save you for the June meeting.
We're going to need a bathroom break for that.
I have about a 23-second update on that.
We'll have you go first in January. We'll be on, okay?
No, June you'll be on. June.
We love you, Ted, and we truly appreciate everything you do.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
And, you know, as we said, we'd rather have your questions early and be able to react to them. Thank you so much.
Okay, Karen, Policy Committee reports.
So the Policy Committee met on October 15th. We finalized some policies. Policy 6110 is the goals and objectives of the personnel system. In that policy, we just updated some grammar. Policy 6214 regarding substitute teachers, we adjusted to be in line with the VSBA. Policy 6410, employee legal defense, updated grammar. Policy 6421 relating to jury duty, broadened to be aligned with the various employment contracts. And these are for second reading.
So we did the second reading policies
Already,
in the consent
yes.
agenda, so.
So I need my other sheet here.
You need it.
There we go. Okay, so the Policy Committee met on November 19, 2024. These policies are being presented for the first reading. Policy number 6441 was the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act compliance. That just updated the grammar. Policy 6470, casual and/or part-time employees. We updated grammar and aligned to the new guidance. Policy 6475 is overtime for hourly employees. We expanded the approval of that. Policy 6480, the grant-funded programs, updated the language. Policy 7110, elementary and secondary students, just updated grammar. And that's all for policy.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Courtney and Ryan.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Do we have any, oh, I'm sorry, we need to add the,
Which was first? I don't
Building and
remember.
finance.
Which do we want to do first?
I'll let Sarah go first if she wants to get it done.
What? Okay, thank you. Thank you. I haven't slept today. Okay. The building committee met on December 3rd. Members present, myself, Franco Sosa, also Mary Beth Lennox Levens, Bill Olson, Bianca McKean, Glenn Scott, Tim Smith, and Pam Reed, all present at the meeting. The Director of Building, Grounds, and Transportation, Glenn Scott, provided updates for the committee. The presentation is attached right in your packet. We kind of went over the stormwater RFP. Phase 1 is complete. The RFPs are due December 19th. Construction is planned for summer of 2025, and that's for the, I think we're referring to it as, what is it, the 3-mile permeable surface runoff situation thing. That's what we're talking about with the stormwater RFP. And then we got a detailed overview on the work order system and staffing review, which, as much as some of you nerd out about numbers, I nerd out about that stuff. And that was really fun to get in and learn about. So he just was reviewing the staffing and the work orders and how the work orders are done and how they're cataloged, so they can get an idea of how the buildings are doing, how everything's working, what needs attention, what's going to need future attention. So he gave us a very detailed report on that. We asked him about the staffing in his department, and Mr. Scott advised he feels the department is currently well-staffed and does not recommend changes, but noted that changing skill sets and reviewing potential of providing a path to train, promote, and retain may be advisable in the future. Talking about, like, you know, you have plumbers, you have skilled plumbers, skilled electricians, all these things, but also all your plumbing systems and your heating systems are becoming more high-tech, and there's lots of computer stuff involved in software, and talking about looking to the future and talking about possibly being able to train our own people so that they can stay here and we can retain them and we can keep them, and we have that long-term longevity in our workforce. So that was something we talked about. He also shared a list of required inspections for our fuel tanks, and they're scheduled for December 9th and 10th, which that just happened, so I'm sure we'll hear an update on that. He also reviewed an updated list of capital projects for FY26. We again discussed electric buses and the future of that, what that looks like. Our district is, I don't think, ready for that kind of thing yet, but we always have our eye on the future and the environment. So, we talked about the proposal for cabinets in cosmetology at Stafford Tech, and that was included in your consent agenda. The next committee meeting for Building and Grounds is January 7th at 5 o'clock. And that is all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Finance and Strategic Planning. We also met last week on December 3rd, and we had 3 topics: the budget, the audit, and the strategic plan. We should have Ted come back up and do the budget. Just kidding. We just got that. I know. No, I don't mean it. I don't mean it, Ted. Okay. Tim's update on the audit for our committee indicated that the work with Sullivan Powers is on schedule. There was a week of on-site testing and review of material requested by Sullivan Powers, and there have been no concerns, I repeat, no concerns or material findings expressed to date. Also, no material audit adjustments of the fiscal year 2024 financial results are expected. Tim said that the auditors will return for several more days of field work and testing. That sounds like a blast. He expects that the audit will be finished in February and that the final report will be submitted to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse by the end of February, which is a whole 1 month earlier than the statutory deadline of March 31st of 2025. So good job. Yay.
Well done.
Bianca then gave us an update on the committee then updated the committee on our strategic plan implementation. She noted that a more comprehensive update will be provided to the full board on January 14th, according to the, I think, quarterly schedule that we established. Bianca described the work being done by the 3 cross-functional teams, with each team focusing on one of the 3 priority areas. The teams include administrators, staff members, and teacher leaders. They are creating work plans for the strategies. These efforts are focused on ensuring that timely progress is being made and gathering the needed data while not overwhelming already really busy staff, so that's key. A template for visualizing planned progress is being created that will be shared with the board throughout the year. And we will meet on January 7th at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
Do
And Tim.
Do we have any unfinished business? Do we have any new business? Okay. Then I entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of consideration of the employment of a public officer and for consideration of contract negotiations, the premature release of information regarding this subject, which would place the board at a substantial disadvantage.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.